It was almost midnight when Ollie found himself at a desolate bus stop, miles outside the city limits. A thick, clammy fog clung to the ground, swallowing the road ahead and making the air feel unnaturally cold. He'd missed the last regular bus, the one that took the safe, well-lit highway. Now, his only option was the final bus of the night, a lone service that cut a path directly through the ancient, sprawling forest. He checked his watch. Jam 11:45 p.m. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an hour in the oppressive silence. Just as he started to lose hope, two faint lights pierced the gloom, growing steadily brighter. An old, long bus, a relic from another era, groaned to a halt in front of him. The doors folded open with a tired, metallic hiss, releasing a gust of stale air. Ollie stepped on, a sense of relief washing over him, but it was short-lived. The interior was dimly lit and eerily empty. Only 3 other people were on board, scattered in the corners like forgotten mannequins. They were silent, motionless, and their skin had a strange, waxy pallor. The driver, a hulking silhouette behind the wheel, didn't utter a word. He just gave a single, curt nod as Ollie paid his fare, his eyes hidden in shadow. Ollie found an empty seat near the middle of the bus, eager to shut out the weird atmosphere. He slipped on his headphones, cranked up the music, and leaned his head against the cool glass of the window, watching the world outside disappear. For the first few minutes, the journey felt normal enough. The bus rumbled along, plunging deeper into the dark forest. Gnarled, ancient trees flanked the road, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes in the swirling fog, like skeletal hands reaching out for the bus. The rhythm of the wheels on the asphalt was hypnotic, and Ollie started to relax, closing his eyes. But soon, a subtle wrongness began to creep into his consciousness, a feeling that something was deeply out of place. It was a sensation he couldn't quite name, a quiet alarm bell ringing in the back of his mind. The bus felt too smooth, too quiet. He realized he couldn't feel the familiar vibration of the engine beneath his feet. There was no rattling, no clanking, none of the usual symphony of a large vehicle in motion. And the silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. He couldn't hear the other passengers shifting in their seats, or coughing, or even breathing. Puzzled, he pulled off his headphones. The sudden, absolute quiet was jarring, unnatural. It was the silence of a vacuum, a void where sound had ceased to exist. His own heartbeat thudded in his ears, a frantic drum against the emptiness. His eyes darted around the cabin. He focused on the man sitting a few rows ahead of him. The man was staring straight forward, his posture rigid. Ollie watched him for what felt like an eternity, waiting for a sign of life, a blink, a twitch, anything. But there was nothing. The man's eyes were wide open, fixed on some unseen point in the distance, like a statue carved from stone. A shiver traced its way down Ollie's spine. He quickly glanced over at the woman on the left side of the aisle. It was the same story. She was perfectly still, her face a pale mask, her eyes unblinking and vacant. An icy dread began to bloom in his chest. Then, his gaze fell upon the old man sitting in the very back row. This was different. This was impossible. The old man wasn't just still. He was defying gravity. His feet weren't touching the floor. He was floating, suspended a few inches above the worn fabric of the seat, his body held in place by some unseen force. Ollie's heart felt like it had turned to a block of ice. The air in his lungs seized. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his confusion. This wasn't just a weird bus ride. This was a nightmare. Forcing his trembling legs to move, Ollie slowly stood up. Each step felt like wading through deep water. He made his way to the front of the bus, his eyes glued to the driver's unmoving form. "Excuse me," he managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper he barely recognized. "Excuse me. Where is this bus going?" The driver didn't turn his head. He didn't even acknowledge Ollie's presence, except for one slow, deliberate movement. He raised a single, gaunt hand and pointed a long, bony finger toward. A small, grimy sign mounted above the windshield. Ollie's eyes followed the gesture. He squinted, trying to make out the faded letters in the dim light. As the words came into focus, the floor seemed to drop out from under him. The sign read, "This bus is for lost souls. Nitrogen monoxide living passengers. Allowed after midnight." A choked gasp escaped his lips. Midnight. It had to be past midnight by now. He stumbled backward, his mind reeling. "No," he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "But I'm alive. I'm alive." The driver finally, slowly, turned his head. The motion was stiff, unnatural. His face was a horrifying canvas of gray skin stretched tight over a skull. Where his eyes should have been, there were only two empty, glowing white voids. When he spoke, his voice was not human. It was a deep, guttural whisper that seemed to echo from the very depths of the earth. Not for long. At that exact moment, as if on cue, the other three passengers turned their heads to face Ali. The sound of their necks cracking and popping was sickeningly loud in the dead silence. Their faces were hollow, their mouths stretched into wide, impossible smiles that split their pale cheeks. Pure terror took over. Ali scrambled for the door, slamming his hand against the button, yanking on the handle. It was locked solid. He turned to the windows, but they were now completely fogged over from the inside, covered in a thick layer of condensation. Even though no one was breathing, the bus suddenly lurched forward, accelerating with terrifying speed, plunging into the darkest, most impenetrable part of the forest. Outside, shadows writhed and danced, clawing at the glass like desperate creatures trying to get in. Ali pounded on the emergency release button again and again, his fists hitting the cold metal in a desperate, frantic rhythm. Nothing happened. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the bus screeched to a halt. The violent stop threw him forward. For a second, everything was still. Then, with a soft whoosh, the doors slid open by themselves, revealing the pitch-black forest outside. Ali didn't hesitate. He launched himself out of the bus and into the night, running blindly. Branches whipped at his face, thorns tore at his clothes, but he didn't slow down. He just ran, fueled by adrenaline and a primal fear he had never known, not daring to look back. After what felt like an eternity, a faint glimmer of light appeared through the trees. A village. Hope surged through him, and he pushed himself harder, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. He finally burst out of the woods and collapsed through the doorway of a small, brightly lit shop, gasping for air and shaking uncontrollably. An old shopkeeper rushed from behind the counter, his face etched with concern. He helped Ali to a chair and brought him a glass of water. "Son, are you all right? Where on earth did you come from?" he asked, his voice gentle. Ali took a few ragged breaths, trying to calm his racing heart. "The last bus?" he panted, the words stumbling out. "The last bus through the forest." The shopkeeper's kindly expression vanished. His face went chalk-white, and his eyes widened in what looked like fear. He spoke softly, his voice barely a whisper. "That's not possible. There is no bus on that route." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "That road was closed down 10 years ago." Ali stared at him, confused. "What? No, I was just on it." The shopkeeper shook his head slowly, a look of profound sadness on his face. "It was closed after the bus crashed, and all the passengers died." A cold dread, worse than anything he'd felt on the bus, washed over Ali. He slowly stood up and turned to look back at the dark road he had just escaped from. The fog, which had been so thick and suffocating, was starting to clear, thinning out like smoke in the wind. As the last wisps drifted away, the truth was laid bare before him. The road was empty. There was no bus, no headlights, no tire tracks in the dirt. There was nothing at all, just a silent, abandoned road leading into the dark heart of the forest. And he was alone.